They let me out of the Stafford Creek Correction Center at 8 in the morning on the 14th of October, and it was raining the way it rains in Grays Harbor County, which is not weather so much as a condition of the air. I had served 27 months of a 32-month sentence for the death of a 23-year-old man named Deacon Pruitt on my own log yard, and I had gone in at 69 years old, and I came out at 71 in the same gray suit I wore to sentencing, and it hung off me like something on a nail. My son was waiting at the curb in a truck that cost more than my first house, with his wife beside him, and a photographer from the Daily World standing about 40 feet off, because my son does not do anything that cannot be photographed. He got out with his arms open, and I walked straight past him to a 19-year-old Buick parked at the far end of that lot with my lawyer leaning against it under an umbrella. And I got in, and I did not say one word to my son, and I have not said one to him since. My name is Cyrus Halvorsen. I am 71 years old. Before I tell you what I spent those 27 months doing, tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight and what the weather is doing there. And hit like and subscribe if you have ever been made to pay for something and been half convinced you deserved it. One honest note before we begin. This story is a work of fiction. The voice you are hearing and the images you are seeing are AI-assisted. Names, places, and events are invented for storytelling. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental. But the lessons about family, greed, and quiet strength are very real. Now, let us begin. I started in the woods in 1972 as a timber cruiser, which is a job that has mostly gone away and which I want to explain because it is the entire shape of my mind. A cruiser walks into a stand of standing timber that nobody has touched, and he tells the people who are about to spend a great deal of money exactly what is actually in there. Not what the map says, not what the seller says. He puts in his plots, and he measures his trees, and he estimates the defect he cannot see, the rot in the butt, the shake, the ring shake you will not find until the mill has already paid for the log. My whole working life was standing in front of a thing and telling the truth about what was inside it before anybody bought it. 16 years of that, and then, in 1988, I put everything my wife and I had into a piece of gravel by the rail spur in Aberdeen and started Halvorsen Reload, and by 2010, it was 91 people and 140 truckloads a day. My wife Ingrid died in 2018. We had one child. Torvald is 46. Everybody calls him Tori, and I made him general manager in 2019 and gave him operational control because I was 65 and tired, and because he is my son, and that is what you do. He is good at the part of the business that involves rooms with air conditioning. He has never in his life been able to look at a deck of logs and tell you which one is going to move. Deacon Pruitt was 23 years old, and he died on my yard at 11 minutes past 2 in the afternoon on the 14th of March, 2022. He was working ground on the east deck when a bunk let go, and about 9 tons of second-growth hemlock came off it, and he did not have anywhere to be that was not under it. I was in Coos Bay that day. I had been in Coos Bay since the Monday. The state came, and the county came, and 11 months later a jury in Montesano convicted me of manslaughter by criminal negligence, and the two things that convicted me were both pieces of paper with my handwriting on them. One was a lockout and tagout release on the east deck brake system, signed C. Halvorsen, undated. The other was the quarterly equipment safety walk for the first quarter of 2022, in my hand, checked and initialed, certifying that all deck brake interlocks were present and functioning. And it was dated the 4th of March, 10 days before that boy died. I did sign both of those things. That is what I could never get anybody to understand, including for a long time myself. I signed 40 forms a week for 34 years. I signed them in the cab of a truck and on the hood of a truck, and standing up in a gravel lot in the rain with a man holding the clipboard. And I signed the quarterly walk and a stack of 11 other documents in my son's office on a Tuesday afternoon in March because he put it in front of me and said, "Pop, initial these." And I initialed them. And I did not walk that yard. And I had not walked that yard in about 7 months. My foreman of 31 years, Ozzie Kalbach, testified for the state. He sat in that box and he said that Cyrus Halvorsen had always run a tight yard until he got old, and that in the last 2 years he had gotten distant, and that the safety walks had become a formality. Every word of that was true. He did not say one thing on that stand that was a lie. That is what made it work. And here is the part I have to tell you before anything else, because if you do not have this, you will not understand a single decision I made afterward. I did not fight it very hard. My attorney, Garrick Nakashima, who has been my lawyer since 1991, wanted to put on an expert and go after the chain of custody on those forms, and I told him no. I told him to take it to the jury straight and let them decide. Because Deacon Pruitt was on my yard because of me. His mother is Wanda Pruitt, and I have known Wanda since she was 11 years old, and her father drove a self-loader for me. Deacon came out of a county diversion program in 2021 with 2 possession charges behind him and no way at all for a young man in this county to get work with that on him. And Wanda came to my house and asked me, and I hired him myself, over my son's objection, on my own signature, and I put him on the ground crew. So when 12 people in Montesano decided that a careless old man had let a boy be killed, I did not have very much in me that wanted to argue. I sat there and I thought, they are right about the boy and wrong about how, and I do not know how to explain the difference to anybody. And maybe there is not one. I went in on the 6th of July, 2023, and I did not appeal. Now I will tell you what I did in there, because a man in a state prison at 69 years old has exactly one tool, and that tool is a pen. I wrote 111 letters in 27 months. Most of them were to Garrick. Some of them were to the state, and 26 of them, one a month, every month, without missing one, were to Wanda Pruitt. I want to be honest about the first one because it was not a good letter. It was the letter of a man who wanted to be forgiven, which is the most selfish thing you can put in an envelope. I wrote it in August of 2023, and she did not answer it. I wrote the second one in September. She did not answer that one either. By about the 6th one, I had stopped asking her for anything, and by about the 10th, I had stopped explaining myself. And after that, they were just letters. What the yard looked like in the spring. Something her father said to me in 1979. The fact that I had put her son on that ground, and that I would carry it. I wrote 26 of them, and she did not answer a single one for 19 months. The other thing I did was slower and duller, and it is the thing that actually broke this open. Every 90 days, I had Garrick file a public records request with the State Department of Labor and Industries, and every 90 days it was denied or partially fulfilled or came back with the wrong thing. And every 90 days, he filed it again. 11 requests over 2 years. And what I wanted was very specific. I did not want the inspection reports. Anybody can get the inspection reports, and I had already read them. I wanted the raw field notes, the handwritten pages an inspector fills out standing in the yard with a pencil before any of it gets typed into a report. Because a report is a summary, and a summary is a decision somebody made. The field notes are what the man actually saw. In February of 2025, on the 11th request, they came. 61 pages, photocopied badly, from an inspection of the Halvorsen Reload East and West decks in September of 2019. And on page 19, In the handwriting of an inspector named Ruby Estrella, there is a line that says, E-deck brake interlock present, tested, functioning, MFR guard in place. Present, functioning, guard in place. In September of 2019. That interlock was not on that deck in March of 2022. The county's own photographs show the mounting holes empty and the wiring pigtailed and capped, which is not damage. That is what it looks like when somebody removes a thing on purpose and does not want it hanging loose. So, between September of 2019 and March of 2022, in a period when the man who was supposedly criminally negligent was not walking that yard at all, somebody took a functioning safety interlock off a log deck. The reason I could not prove that at trial is that the state's report from 2019 does not mention the interlock, not in a single line. It got summarized out because nothing was wrong with it, and reports are about what is wrong. I got out on the 14th of October. Garrick drove me to a motel on Wishka because I have nowhere to live. The house on Cherry Street is in the family trust, and my son's wife has been living in it for 2 years, and there is nothing in this world I can do about that. He had brought me a phone, a bank card with $1,100 on it, and a folder. I want to describe what he said in that car, because Garrick Nakashima is 68, and he has been a small-town lawyer his whole life, and he is not a dramatic man. He said, "Cy, before you look at that folder, I need to tell you something." He said, "Wanda Pruitt wrote to me in May, not to you, to me." She had answered on the 19th letter, in a way. She did not write back to the prison. She looked up my attorney and she came to his office on a Tuesday in May, and she sat in his waiting room for 40 minutes before she went in. And what she brought with her was a phone, an old one, 4 years dead, in a drawer since 2022 with the charger, because she had never been able to make herself get rid of it, because there were 17 voicemails on it from her son. The 3rd of March, 2022. 11 days before he died, 2 minutes and 9 seconds. Garrick has it now, and there is a certified copy in the county evidence room, and I have listened to it 4 times, and I am not going to listen to it again. Deacon Pruitt calls his mother at 4:40 in the afternoon from the gravel outside the office. You can hear a truck backing, and he says, "Mama, I got to tell you something, and then you can tell me I am being stupid." He says the brake box came off the east deck sometime last year, and nobody put it back, and they are running the deck anyway. He says he told Ozzy about it twice, and Ozzy told him it was above his pay grade. And then he says the thing that I have not been able to get out from under since the 1st of June, when Garrick played it for me on a speakerphone in a room at Stafford Creek. He says, "Mr. Halvorsen is the only one out here who would back me up, but he is in Coos Bay till Thursday." That boy waited for me. He knew there was one man on that property who would go to the wall for him about a safety guard, and he decided to wait for that man to come back off a trip, and he went back out on the ground for 11 more days, and on the 11th one, the deck let go. I have thought about whether I am the villain of that voicemail, or whether I am the one thing in it that gave him hope, and I still do not know, and I have stopped expecting to. The folder was the rest of it. Garrick had spent 5 months quietly doing what a lawyer does when he finally has one true thing to build on. The interlock came off the east deck in June of 2021. It came off because throughput on that deck was running 11% under the contract minimum on the Kalama export commitment, and the interlock adds about 40 seconds to a bunk cycle, and 40 seconds times 200 cycles a shift is what stood between Halvorsen Reload and a penalty clause my son had personally negotiated and personally signed. He did not take it off himself. He told Ozzy Kalbach to take it off on a Thursday afternoon in June of 2021 in the yard office in front of the scale operator who remembers it. Ozzy is 69 years old. He has silicosis and about 9 liters of lung capacity between the two of them, and he is on oxygen at night now. He worked for me for 31 years, and I stood up at his daughter's wedding. He took that thing off a deck because his boss told him to, and then a boy died under that deck. And then he sat in a courtroom in Montesano and testified truthfully about what a poor job I had been doing, and every single word of it was true. And none of it was the answer to the question they were asking. Garrick went to see him in August. He said Ozzy opened the door and looked at him and said, "Took you long enough," and then sat down and talked for 4 hours into a recorder with his own lawyer on the phone. The reason he did it in 2023 and not in 2022, the reason he let me go in, is a thing I am going to state plainly and then leave alone. My son knew that Ozzy Callback had been running his own load out of the yard for 9 years. Not much, a few thousand a year in cull logs sold off the back of the property to a shake mill in Elma. 9 years of it, which is enough to put a 69-year-old man with no pension and a bad chest into a courtroom of his own. My son sat on that for a decade and spent it in one afternoon. I went to see Wanda Pruitt on the 21st of October, 7 days out. She lives in a manufactured home off Ocean Beach Road, and she came out on the steps, and I stood in the gravel and did not go up them. And we looked at each other for a while. She said, I did not answer because, for the first year, I wanted you to be guilty. She said, you have got to understand that I needed there to be somebody. And I said, I did. And she said, and then in the second year, I started reading them different. And by about the 20th one, I understood that you were not writing to get anything out of me. And that is when I went and got the phone. Then she said the thing that put me on my knees in that gravel, which is that she had listened to that voicemail perhaps 200 times in 3 years and had never once heard the sentence about Coos Bay. Because a mother listening to her dead son's voice does not hear the words. She hears the voice. She said, I heard him say your name in the middle of it, about a year in, and I stopped the phone, and I played it back. And then I sat on that floor for a long time. Now, I am going to tell you what I did with all of it. And I want to be honest that a version of this exists where I did it differently, and I have thought about that version. I did not take it to the county on the 15th of October. I could have. I had a voicemail and a foreman's statement and 61 pages of field notes and a scale operator, and Detective Perpetua Iono at the sheriff's office would have taken a meeting that same week. I waited 9 weeks. Here is why. My son had spent 27 months telling this county that his father was a good man who got old and made a mistake. And he had been very generous about it in public, and it had worked. And in September, the Port District put out a request for proposals on a 15-year lease renewal on the 81 acres my yard sits on, which we do not own and never have. And the board vote was set for the 18th of December. Tory had that renewal wired. He had 2 of the 5 commissioners, and he had spent 2 years building a story in which Halvorsen Reload was a family firm that had suffered a tragedy and reformed itself under new leadership. If I had gone to the sheriff in October, he would have been a man under investigation, which in this county means he would have been a man being persecuted by his bitter father, and he would have had 90 days to run that story. And I know exactly how good he is at running a story, because I watched him do it to me for 11 months. So I let him have November. I let him have the chamber luncheon and the piece in the Daily World about the new safety culture, with a photograph of him standing on the east deck. He put out a press release about a scholarship in Deacon Pruitt's name. $4,000 a year. He called Wanda and asked her permission, and she gave it to him, and then she called Garrick and told him about it, and Garrick told me. And I sat in a motel room on Wishka Street and looked at the ceiling for a while. I did nothing at all for 9 weeks. I got a room in a house on Broadway Hill from a woman who used to run the scale for me. I ate at the counter at the Duffy's on Simpson 3 or 4 times a week, and I let this town look at me. I want to tell you that this part was strategy, and it was. But it was also the only way I could think of to be in the same county as what I had done, which was to be visible. And I filed one thing. On the 3rd of November, in my own name, as a private citizen, I filed a petition with the Port District, asking to be heard on the record at the lease renewal hearing on the 18th of December. Any person may do that. It is on a form. It cost nothing. Tory's attorney tried to have me struck from the agenda in early December on the grounds that I am a convicted felon with a personal grievance. The Port District's counsel told him in writing that the public comment period is the public comment period. On the 9th of December, Garrick walked the whole file into Detective Iono's office with Ozzie Callback's recorded statement and the certified voicemail and Ruby Estrella's field notes and the scale operator and asked her for one thing, which was that she not act on it for 9 days. She is a good detective, and she thought about it for about half a minute, and then she said no, she could not agree to that. And then she said that, as it happened, a case of that age was going to take her at least until after the holidays to work up properly, and that she would be starting on it in earnest sometime around the 19th or 20th of December. And she looked at Garrick, and Garrick looked at her, and neither of them said anything else about it. The Port District meets in a room at the Terminal Building on Port Industrial Road that holds about 60 people and normally has 9 in it. On the 18th of December, there were about 140, and they were standing along the back wall. I do not know how a thing like that gets around a town like this. It gets around. Tory presented for 11 minutes. He was very good. He talked about 91 jobs, and he talked about his father's legacy, and he used the word tragedy twice, and the word accountability once, and he had a slide with the scholarship on it. Then the chair called for public comment, and I stood up and walked to the front with a folder. And I am going to tell you what I said, because I wrote it out beforehand in that room on Broadway Hill, and I said it almost exactly. I said, "My name is Cyrus Halvorsen. I built this yard in 1988, and I have just finished serving 27 months in a state prison for the death of Deacon Pruitt." I said, "I want to start by saying that I was negligent." I said, "I stopped walking my own yard, and I initialed a safety walk I did not perform. And I hired that boy myself, and every day of those 27 months belonged to me." And then I said, "And none of that is why he died." I put the field notes on the overhead. I put page 19 up on a screen in a room in the Terminal Building where I have sat through 200 meetings. And I read Ruby Estrella's handwriting out loud. Present, tested, functioning, September 2019. And then I put up the county's photograph from March 2022 of 2 empty bolt holes and a capped pigtail. And then I said, "I am going to play you a voicemail that a 23-year-old man left his mother 11 days before he died. And Wanda Pruitt is sitting in the second row, and she has given me her permission, and I would ask you to listen to the whole of it." I have been in rooms that were quiet. That room was something else. When it got to the part about Coos Bay, a woman near the back made a sound and put her hand over her mouth. Tory stood up before it finished. He said, "This is a personal matter. This is not what this hearing is for." And the chair, a woman named Delma Sarkis, who has been on that board 19 years and who buried a husband who worked in the woods, said, "Mr. Halvorsen, sit down." And he sat down. The commission tabled the lease. It was not a vote against him. It was a motion to table pending, and I quote the minutes, "information received in public comment." Delma Sarkis moved it herself. Detective Iono began working the case in earnest sometime around the 20th of December, exactly as she had said she would. They arrested my son on the 11th of February in the parking lot of the Ocean Shores Golf Club, which was not my doing, and which I did not ask for, and which I will admit to you I have not lost 1 hour of sleep over. He pleaded in September, manslaughter in the second degree, and tampering with physical evidence, which is the count for the quarterly walk, because he was the one who put that form in the stack in front of me, and he was the one who wrote the date on it. He took 11 years. Ozzy Callback took 18 months on a plea with cooperation, and he will do most of it in the medical unit at Coyote Ridge, and I do not expect him to come out of there. My conviction was vacated on the 2nd of April on a joint motion. There is a piece of paper in a file in Montesano that says the state of Washington was wrong. That is all it says. It does not say anything about 27 months, and it is not supposed to. They brought me back to run the yard in June, and I did it for 4 months, and then I did the only thing I actually wanted to do, which is that in October, 1 year to the week from the day I walked out of Stafford Creek, we closed on putting Halvorsen Reload into an employee stock ownership trust. 91 people own that gravel now. I hold nothing. Wanda Pruitt sits on the board of trustees, and she said yes to that faster than anybody expected her to. And when I asked her why, she said, because somebody in that room needs to be somebody's mother. The east deck has an interlock on it. It has had one since the 16th of June. There is a plate bolted to the frame beside it that says East Deck, Deacon Pruitt, and under that it says, check it out loud. And every shift lead on that yard is required to walk to that plate at the start of a shift and say the check out loud where another person can hear him. It is a nuisance. It costs about 90 seconds. It is going to save somebody eventually, and none of us will ever know who. My son has written to me 4 times. I have read all 4. He has asked me for a lawyer, for money on his books, for a letter to the board about his classification, and in the 4th one he asked me how I was. I have not answered any of them yet, and I want to be plain that this is not strength, and it is not a position. I am 71 years old, and I have not yet worked out how to write a letter to a man who let me go into a prison for a thing he did. And I have 26 letters of practice at writing to somebody who does not answer, so I know how long it can take. And I know that it is not nothing to be written to. I live in a room on Broadway Hill. I go to Duffy's on Simpson. On the 2nd Saturday of the month, I drive out Ocean Beach Road, and Wanda Pruitt makes coffee, and we sit on those steps, and mostly we do not talk about any of this. This is a work of fiction, and the voice you have been listening to is not a living man. But the lesson under it is as real as wet gravel and cold steel. I spent 16 years walking into stands of timber and telling people what was actually inside a tree before they paid for it. And the whole art of it is that you cannot see the defect. The rot is in the butt. The shake is on the inside. Everything that will cost you is invisible from where you are standing, and the only thing a cruiser has is that he does not accept the outside of the tree as the answer. And then I ran a business for 34 years, and I stopped walking my own yard, and I initialed a page I had not read, and I let a man hand me a stack of paper on a Tuesday afternoon because he was my son and I was tired. So walk your own ground. Nobody can do it for you, and the day you let somebody else do it is not the day it goes wrong. It is only the day it starts. And if you are ever made to carry a thing that is half yours, carry the half. Just do not pick up the other half to make somebody else's arithmetic come out. My name is Cyrus Halvorsen, and they buried the wrong man.